Draeven walked into his bedroom at dawn and froze. The Omega servant changing his sheets looked up. Their eyes locked. The bond slammed into him like a freight train. Pine and smoke and something wild flooded his senses. His wolf surged forward, howling one word, mate. No. Not her. Not the servant his pack bought to clear a debt. Not an Omega with zero power and a family that sold her like livestock. His hands started shaking. The marble banister cracked under his grip. Lyric stood there holding his pillow, her face showing the same devastating recognition. For 3 seconds, neither moved. Then the Alpha King did something he'd never done in his life. He ran. If you believe the moon goddess has a sick sense of humor, hit that subscribe button to Seraphina's romance stories right now. Because what happens next is going to blow your mind. And if you're someone who thinks powerful alphas should accept their fated bonds no matter what, drop a comment saying fate doesn't lie. Let's see how many of you really believe that when you hear the whole story. Lyric stood in the Alpha King's bedroom for 10 full minutes after he left, her brain trying to process what had just happened. The mate bond was real. Every werewolf grew up hearing about it, the instant recognition, the magnetic pull, the feeling of coming home to someone you'd never met. She'd always thought it sounded like a fairy tale. Turns out fairy tales could be nightmares too. Her wolf was going absolutely crazy inside her head, whining and pacing and demanding they follow their mate. Lyric told her wolf to shut up and focus. The Alpha King had looked at her like she was a disease he needed to quarantine. Not exactly the romantic mate bond awakening the stories talked about. She forced herself to finish changing the sheets even though her hands were trembling. Work. She could focus on work. Work made sense. Work didn't require her to understand why the universe had decided to bond her to the one wolf on the planet who'd rather die than accept an Omega as his mate. Sage Ironwood appeared in the doorway 20 minutes later, her expression unreadable. Pack your belongings. You're being moved to the East Wing. Lyric's stomach dropped. The East Wing was where they sent servants who'd messed up but weren't quite bad enough to fire. Isolation quarters. Did I do something wrong? Sage's eyes softened for just a second. No, honey. You did something much worse. You became relevant. 2 guards escorted Lyric to her new room like she was a prisoner being transferred to a new cell. The East Wing was older, colder, further from the main palace. Her new quarters were barely 10 feet by 10 feet, a bed, a dresser, a tiny window that looked out at the forest. At least she had her own bathroom now instead of sharing with 6 other servants. Small victories. She sat on the bed and tried to think. The Alpha King knew about the bond. He'd felt it too, she'd seen the recognition in his eyes, the brief moment where his entire body had leaned toward hers before he'd slammed that door shut and walked away. Now he was avoiding her. Moving her out of his space like she was contaminated. Lyric should have felt insulted. Instead, she felt relieved. She didn't want a mate either, especially not one who'd benefited from her family's debt. The Whitlock family had sold her to the Nightfang pack. Draeven Nightfang owned that pack. Which meant, in a very real sense, he owned her. The idea of being fated to someone who had that kind of power over her life made her skin crawl. Let him avoid her. She'd avoid him right back. 10 years. She just had to survive 10 more years, and then she'd be free of all of them, her family, this pack, and the mate who didn't want her. That night, Lyric barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Draeven's face in that moment of recognition. Gold eyes going wide. Jaw dropping open. The way his pupils had dilated like he'd been hit with something physical. Then the anger. Oh, the anger had been something to witness. She'd never seen someone look so furious about finding their fated mate. Most wolves spent their whole lives searching for that bond. Draeven had looked like he wanted to claw his own skin off to escape it. Around 3 a.m, Lyric's wolf started howling inside her head. The bond was pulling at her, trying to drag her consciousness toward wherever Draeven was in the palace. She could feel him somehow, a presence in the back of her mind that shouldn't be there, taking up space she hadn't agreed to share. It felt invasive. Wrong. Like someone had moved furniture around in her brain without asking permission. She got up and splashed cold water on her face. The woman in the mirror looked exhausted and angry and lost. Lyric barely recognized herself. 4 months ago, she'd been nobody, just an Omega with a grudge against her family and zero expectations for her future. Now she was the Alpha King's fated mate. A secret that would destroy her if anyone found out. Because Omegas who claimed to be mated to powerful alphas without proof? They disappeared. Sage had told her the stories during her first week. 3 Omegas in the past 5 years had insisted they were Draeven's mate. One had shown up at the palace gates claiming the moon goddess had told her in a vision. Another had been a servant like Lyric who'd convinced herself that the bond was there when it wasn't. The third had been an Omega from an allied pack whose father had coached her to seduce the Alpha King and fake a mate claim for political gain. All 3 had been exposed as liars. All 3 had been exiled to the border territories, branded as frauds, their reputations destroyed so thoroughly they might as well have been dead. Lyric understood the message. Even if she could prove the bond was real, nobody would believe her. They'd assume she was just another desperate Omega trying to trap the Alpha King into a bond he didn't want. She laughed bitterly at her reflection. For once in her life, fate had given her something valuable, and it was the one thing she couldn't use. The bond that should have elevated her status instead made her a target. If word got out that the Alpha King's fated mate was a servant working off her family's debt, the scandal would be nuclear. Rival packs would use it against him. Allied packs would question his judgment. And Draeven? He'd probably kill her himself just to make the problem go away. Hit that like button if you think the moon goddess seriously needs to rethink her matching system. And comment Omegas deserve better if you're not one of those wolves who think status matters more than fate. Because trust me, the Alpha King is about to prove just how much he values power over destiny. Only cowards and status-obsessed alphas won't engage with this video. Draeven didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Lyric Whitlock. 21 years old. Brown skin that glowed in the morning light. Natural hair pulled back in a bun that didn't hide how beautiful it was. Eyes that looked at him with zero worship, zero fear, just shock and confusion. An Omega. His fated mate was an Omega. The universe had to be laughing at him. Draeven had spent 15 years building a reputation as the strongest, most ruthless Alpha King in 3 generations. He'd unified fractured packs through strategy and force. He'd executed rogue alphas who threatened innocent wolves. He'd negotiated treaties that prevented wars. Every decision he made was calculated to strengthen his pack, to protect his people, to maintain the power structure that kept everyone safe. And now fate wanted him to bond with an Omega whose family had sold her to him like property? An Omega who had zero political value, zero alliance connections, zero ability to strengthen his position? An Omega who'd probably resent him for the rest of her life because his pack had accepted her as payment for a debt. His wolf disagreed violently with this assessment. His wolf had taken one whiff of Lyric's scent and decided she was perfect. His wolf wanted to march back to that bedroom, throw her over his shoulder, carry her to his private quarters, and complete the mating bond immediately. Draeven told his wolf to shut the hell up and think logically. Phoenix knocked on his study door at dawn. "We need to talk about the Omega." Draeven poured himself a whiskey even though it was 6 in the morning. "There's nothing to talk about. My king, with all due respect, your fated mate just appeared in your bedroom." "That's not nothing." Phoenix sat down without being invited, which meant this conversation was happening whether Draeven wanted it or not. "You felt the bond. I can see it on your face, you look like you're fighting off a physical illness. Your wolf is going crazy inside you right now. Don't bother denying it." Draeven drank the whiskey in one swallow. "It doesn't matter. I'm rejecting the bond." Phoenix's expression went carefully blank. "That's not advisable. I don't recall asking for advice. Rejecting a fated mate bond can kill both parties. You know this." Phoenix leaned forward. "The bond is sacred. It's not something you can just ignore or wish away. The longer you fight it, the worse the consequences become. Wolves have gone feral trying to reject their mates. Alphas have lost their packs. Both parties can die if the rejection isn't accepted mutually." Draeven slammed his glass down. "Then I'll get her to accept the rejection. Problem solved." "You think an Omega who just discovered her fated mate is the Alpha King is going to agree to walk away from that bond? Even if she hates you, even if she's terrified, her wolf won't let her." Phoenix rubbed his temples. "This isn't a problem you can intimidate or negotiate away. This is fate. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes." Draeven laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The moon goddess mated me to a servant my pack accepted as payment for a debt. That's either a mistake or a cosmic joke. Either way, I'm not playing along." Phoenix was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want me to do?" "Keep her away from me. Make sure she understands that I'm not interested in pursuing this bond. Assign her new duties that keep her on the opposite side of the palace from wherever I am. If she tries to claim the bond publicly, we handle it like we handled the others, exile her quietly and make sure she understands that her reputation will be destroyed if she talks." Phoenix looked physically pained. "You want me to threaten your fated mate with exile? I want you to manage a problem before it becomes a crisis." Draeven's voice went cold. "She's an Omega with no political power and a family that threw her away. She has nothing to lose by claiming a mate bond with me. That makes her dangerous. Or desperate," Phoenix said quietly. "Did you ever consider that maybe she doesn't want this either? That maybe she's just as horrified by this bond as you are?" Draeven paused. He hadn't considered that. His wolf snarled at the suggestion, insulted by the idea that their mate wouldn't want them. But the human side of his brain recognized the truth in Phoenix's words. Lyric had looked shocked in that bedroom, yes. But not excited. Not happy. Just stunned. Like someone had hit her over the head with information she didn't know how to process. Maybe she was horrified. Maybe she understood exactly how complicated this bond made both their lives. Maybe she was already planning how to hide it, how to survive the next 10 years without anyone finding out. The thought should have made Draeven feel better. Instead, it made something twist in his chest, an emotion he didn't want to examine too closely. "Find out what she wants," Draeven heard himself say. "Talk to her. Figure out if she's going to be a problem. And Phoenix? Be subtle. I don't want anyone else knowing about this. Not Sage. Not the other servants. Nobody. Phoenix nodded slowly. And if she wants to pursue the bond? Draven's eyes flashed gold. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. After Phoenix left, Draven stood at the window of his study and stared out at the forest. Somewhere in this palace, his fated mate was probably crying or panicking or planning. He could feel her through the bond, a faint presence in his consciousness, warm and steady and completely unwanted. His wolf kept trying to focus on that connection, to follow it back to wherever she was, to make sure she was safe and comfortable and happy. Draven shut that down hard. He'd spent his entire adult life in control. Control of his pack. Control of his emotions. Control of his future. He wasn't about to let some cosmic accident take that away from him. Even if every instinct in his body was screaming at him to go to her. Even if his hands were still shaking from the effort of walking away. Even if some small, traitorous part of him wondered what would have happened if he'd stayed in that bedroom and let himself feel the bond instead of fighting it. Draven crushed that thought immediately. Weakness led to vulnerability. Vulnerability led to exploitation. And an alpha king couldn't afford either. Not even for his fated mate. Especially not for his fated mate. Smash that subscribe button if you think Draven is making the biggest mistake of his life right now. Comment accept your mate if you're Team Moon Goddess, or comment protect your power if you think the Alpha King is right to put his pack first. Let's see which side wins. Only wolves who don't believe in fate will skip this video without engaging. Phoenix found Lyric in the servants' dining hall the next morning, eating oatmeal alone at a corner table. Every other servant in the room kept glancing at her nervously, like she'd grown a second head overnight. Phoenix understood why. Word had spread that the new Omega had been moved to isolation quarters within 24 hours of starting her chamber duties. In palace politics, that usually meant someone had seriously messed up or seriously threatened someone important. Neither explanation was good. Lyric Whitlock. I need to speak with you. Privately. Phoenix kept his voice neutral, professional. Lyric looked up at him with those eyes that probably haunted Draven's dreams now. She didn't look scared. She looked tired and resigned, like she'd been expecting this conversation. Am I being fired? No. But we need to discuss your situation. Phoenix gestured toward the door. Walk with me. They walked through the gardens in silence for several minutes. Phoenix studied her carefully, trying to understand what Draven had seen in that bedroom. She was pretty, yes. Beautiful, even. But the Alpha King had been around beautiful wolves his entire life. This was something else. Something that went beyond physical attraction. The mate bond was pulling at Draven so hard Phoenix could practically see it. His king had aged 5 years overnight, fighting against instincts that wouldn't be denied. Finally, Phoenix spoke. The Alpha King felt the bond. You felt it too. Don't bother denying it, I can smell the mate's scent on you. Faint, but there. Lyric stopped walking. Her jaw tightened. Is that why I'm about to be exiled? Because I became his mate without permission? No one's exiling you. Phoenix held up a hand. But we need to understand what you want. Are you planning to claim the bond publicly? Are you going to demand that the Alpha King acknowledge you as his mate? Are you going to use this connection to gain status or influence in the pack? Lyric laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was bitter and sharp. You think I want any of this? You think I woke up yesterday hoping to be mated to the Alpha King who owns the debt my family used to sell me? That sounds like a fairy tale to you? Phoenix blinked. He'd been prepared for tears, for anger, for desperation. Not sarcasm. So you're not interested in pursuing the bond? I'm interested in surviving the next 10 years and getting the hell away from all of you. Lyric's voice dropped low. Your pack accepted me as payment for my family's mistakes. I'm basically property until that debt is cleared. Now you're telling me I'm also fated to the wolf who owns that debt? That's not destiny. That's a curse. Phoenix studied her for a long moment. The Alpha King is prepared to reject the bond if necessary. Something flickered across Lyric's face, pain, maybe, or relief. Good. Because I'm not interested in being anyone's mate. Especially not someone who looks at me like I'm a problem that needs to be solved. Rejecting a mate bond isn't simple, Phoenix warned. It requires both parties to formally reject each other. If you don't accept the rejection, the bond will keep pulling at both of you until it drives you both insane. Wolves have died from incomplete rejections. Lyric wrapped her arms around herself. So what are you asking me to do? I'm asking if you'll agree to a mutual rejection. The Alpha King wants this bond gone. If you want it gone too, we can arrange a private ceremony. Clean break. No scandal. No exile. You finish your 10 years of service, and then you leave with a clean record and enough money to start over somewhere else. It was a generous offer. More than generous, it was unprecedented. Phoenix was offering Lyric a way out of the bond with zero consequences and a financial reward at the end. Most Omegas in her position would have jumped at that deal. Lyric looked at him like he'd offered her poison. And if I say no? If I decide I don't want to reject the bond? Phoenix's expression went cold. Then you'll be handled the same way we've handled every other Omega who's tried to claim a bond with the Alpha King. You'll be transferred to the border territories, your reputation will be destroyed, and you'll spend the rest of your life working in the mines. Your family will be informed that you attempted to deceive the pack leadership. The debt they still owe will be increased to reflect the dishonor you brought to their name. The threat hung in the air between them. Lyric's face went pale. You'd do that? Even though the bond is real? Even though your Alpha King knows I'm his mate? The Alpha King cannot afford to have an Omega mate with no political value and a debt-marked family. It would weaken his position with every allied pack. They'd see it as proof that he's lost control, that he's making emotional decisions instead of strategic ones. Rival packs would use it against him. He'd lose respect, lose alliances, potentially lose everything he's built. Phoenix's voice softened slightly. I know this isn't fair. I know you didn't choose this. But neither did he. And between your suffering and the suffering of the thousands of wolves who depend on the Alpha King to keep them safe, the choice is clear. Lyric was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. I'll agree to the rejection. But I want something in exchange. Phoenix raised an eyebrow. You're in no position to negotiate. You want me to walk away from my fated mate and pretend the bond never existed. You want me to lie to every instinct in my body for the next 10 years, ignoring the mate pull while I serve the wolf I'm bonded to. That's not easy. That's not free. Lyric met his eyes. I want my debt cleared immediately. I want to leave this pack as soon as the rejection is complete. And I want enough money to relocate to a neutral territory and start over. No connections to my family. No record of the debt. Clean slate. Phoenix was impressed despite himself. The Omega had guts. That's a lot to ask. That's the price of my cooperation. Take it or leave it. Phoenix considered. The Alpha King would hate this. He'd see it as giving in to blackmail. But the alternative was worse, a rejected mate who stayed in the palace for 10 years, the bond slowly poisoning both of them, the risk of exposure growing every day. I'll take your terms to the Alpha King. He'll make the final decision. Lyric nodded. Tell him I don't want his pity. I don't want his money. I just want my freedom. She turned to walk away, then paused. And tell him something else. Tell him I felt the bond too. I felt everything. The pull. The recognition. The rightness of it. I felt my wolf screaming at me to stay, to fight, to claim what was mine. Her voice broke slightly. Tell him I'm walking away anyway. Because even a fated bond isn't worth losing myself. Hit that like button if you respect Lyric for walking away instead of fighting for a bond that would only hurt her. Comment freedom over fate if you think she's making the right choice. And if you're someone who believes wolves should prioritize survival over destiny, you better subscribe right now. Only foolish romantics who think love conquers all won't engage with this video. Draeven received Lyric's terms through Phoenix that afternoon. He sat in his study, staring at the paper listing her demands, feeling something twist inside his chest that he refused to name. She wanted out. Not just out of the bond, but out of his pack entirely. She was willing to walk away from her fated mate for the chance to be free. Part of him was relieved. This solved his problem perfectly. He'd clear her debt, give her enough money to disappear, complete the rejection ceremony, and move on with his life. The bond would hurt for a while, rejection always did, but eventually it would fade. He'd be free to focus on his pack, his responsibilities, his carefully constructed life. But another part of him, the part he was desperately trying to ignore, felt like someone had punched him in the gut. His wolf was howling with rage and grief, thrashing against Draeven's control so violently it was giving him a headache. His mate was walking away. She'd felt the bond and decided it wasn't worth keeping. Decided he wasn't worth keeping. Phoenix stood by the window, waiting for a response. She's tougher than I expected. She's an Omega, Draeven said flatly. They're all manipulative. This is probably just a negotiating tactic to get more money out of me. You don't believe that? Phoenix's voice was gentle. You felt the bond. You know she's not faking this. Draeven crumpled the paper in his fist. Accept her terms. Set up the rejection ceremony for tomorrow night. Private. Just her, me, you, and Sage as witnesses. I want this over with. My king, that's an order, Phoenix. Draeven's eyes flashed gold. Do it. Phoenix left. Draeven sat alone in his study and tried to convince himself this was the right decision. An Alpha King couldn't afford to make choices based on emotion. He had to think about his pack, his alliances, his legacy. A mate bond with an Omega would complicate everything. It would make him look weak. It would give his enemies ammunition. It would undermine the authority he'd spent years building. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Lyric's face in that bedroom. The way her eyes had widened when the bond hit. The way her pulse had jumped in her throat. The way she'd looked at him like he was both the answer to every question she'd ever asked and the worst thing that had ever happened to her. He'd walked away from that look. He was about to walk away from it permanently. His wolf was screaming that this was wrong, that he was making a catastrophic mistake, that he'd regret this for the rest of his life. Draeven told his wolf to shut up. Logic over instinct. Power over emotion. Survival over sentiment. That night, Draeven couldn't sleep again. The bond was pulling at him harder than ever, like his body knew time was running out. He could feel Lyric somewhere in the palace, awake like him, probably fighting the same battle. He wondered if her wolf was howling like his was. He wondered if she felt the wrongness of what they were about to do. He wondered if she'd cry during the rejection ceremony or if she'd face it with the same steel he'd seen in her eyes when Phoenix had delivered her terms. Around midnight, Draeven made a decision he'd regret for the rest of his life. He got up, got dressed, and walked to the east wing. He told himself he just needed to see her one more time. To confirm that the bond wasn't as strong as his wolf insisted. To prove that walking away was the right choice. To look at her and feel nothing but relief that this problem was about to be solved. He found her standing at her window, staring out at the forest. She must have sensed him approaching because she turned before he knocked. Their eyes met through the glass. The bond slammed into him all over again, stronger this time. Devastating. His wolf surged forward so hard Draeven nearly shifted right there in the hallway. Lyric looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. Pain, maybe. Longing. Resignation. She mouthed one word, "Don't." Then she closed the curtains. Draeven stood in that hallway for 20 minutes, his hand raised to knock, his entire body screaming at him to break down the door and claim what was his. Every instinct, every fiber of his being, every piece of his soul was telling him that walking away from this bond would be the biggest mistake of his life. He lowered his hand. Turned around. Walked away. Logic over instinct. Power over emotion. Survival over sentiment. Tomorrow, they'd complete the rejection. Tomorrow, the bond would be broken. Tomorrow, he'd prove that he was stronger than fate. But tonight, Draeven Nightfang admitted something to himself that he'd never admit to anyone else: he didn't want to let her go. The rejection ceremony was scheduled for 9 p.m. the following night in the Alpha King's private office. Sage set up the space according to tradition, candles arranged in a circle, ash from burned sage, a ceremonial knife that would be used to sever the bond physically if the verbal rejection wasn't enough. Phoenix stood by the door, his expression carefully neutral. Draeven arrived first, his face like carved stone. He'd spent the day handling pack business, responding to correspondence, meeting with allies, doing everything possible to avoid thinking about what he was about to do. It hadn't worked. His wolf had been clawing at his insides all day, begging him to stop this. Lyric arrived exactly on time. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red but dry. If she'd been crying, she'd done it alone where no one could see. She met Draeven's gaze steadily, no fear, no hope, just grim determination. Sage began the ritual. We gathered tonight to acknowledge a bond that the moon goddess created and to sever that bond by mutual agreement. Alpha King Draeven Nightfang, do you acknowledge the mate bond with Lyric Whitlock? Draeven's voice was steady. I acknowledge it. Lyric Whitlock, do you acknowledge the mate bond with Alpha King Draeven Nightfang? Lyric's voice was quieter but just as firm. I acknowledge it. Then we proceed with the rejection. Alpha King, speak your rejection. This was it. The moment where everything changed. Draeven opened his mouth to say the words that would sever the bond forever. And stopped. Because he couldn't do it. Every word died in his throat. His wolf was in full rebellion, fighting him so hard Draeven could barely keep his human form. His hands were shaking. His heart was racing. His entire body was rejecting the idea of rejecting her. Everyone in the room was staring at him now. Sage looked confused. Phoenix looked worried. Lyric looked hopeful. No, that couldn't be right. She wanted this rejection as much as he did. Didn't she? My king? Sage prompted gently. The words are simple. Just say, I can't. Draeven's voice came out strangled. I can't do it. The room went silent. Lyric's eyes went wide. What? I can't reject you. Draeven looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since the bond had awakened. I've spent 2 days trying to convince myself this is the right decision. That walking away from you is what's best for my pack, for my position, for my future. But it's a lie. Every instinct in my body is telling me that losing you would be the biggest mistake I'll ever make. Lyric took a step back. You're just saying this because you can't complete the rejection. Your wolf is fighting you. It doesn't mean, it means everything. Draeven moved toward her before he could stop himself. I felt the bond 2 days ago and I ran. I've been running ever since. But I'm done running. I'm done pretending this doesn't matter. I'm done choosing logic over what my soul is screaming at me to accept. Stop. Lyric's voice shook. You don't want me. You want the bond. You want the idea of a mate. But you don't want me. I'm an Omega. I'm nobody. I'm here because my family sold me to clear their debt. You rejecting me would be a mercy. Then why are you crying? Draeven's voice was soft. Lyric wiped her eyes angrily. She hadn't even realized she was crying. Because you're making this so much harder than it needs to be. We agreed. We made a plan. Just say the words and let me go. No. Draeven, I'm not letting you go. The Alpha King's eyes were blazing gold now. I'm not completing this rejection. I'm not watching you walk out of my life because I'm too afraid of what the other packs will think. You're my mate. Mine. And I'm keeping you. Hit subscribe if you think Draeven just made the right choice by following his heart instead of his head. Comment keep your mate if you believe the Alpha King should fight for this bond no matter the cost. And if you're someone who thinks love should win over politics, you better like this video right now. Only cold-hearted alphas who care more about status than soulmates won't engage. Lyric stared at Draeven like he'd lost his mind. You're keeping me? I'm not a pet. You can't just decide, you're right. I'm sorry. That came out wrong. Draeven ran a hand through his hair, looking more uncertain than an Alpha King should ever look. What I mean is, I'm asking you not to complete the rejection. I'm asking for a chance to see if this bond could work. If we could work. Why? Lyric's voice was barely a whisper. 2 days ago you couldn't get away from me fast enough. You moved me to isolation quarters. You sent Phoenix to threaten me with exile. Now you want to keep the bond? What changed? I saw you last night. Standing at your window. I was going to knock, going to say something, but you told me not to. You closed the curtains. And I realized something. Draeven stepped closer. You were protecting me. Even though I'd been horrible to you, even though I'd threatened everything you wanted, you were still trying to protect me from making a stupid decision. You told me not to come in because you knew if I did, if we talked, I might not be able to walk away. You were giving me an out. Lyric's breath hitched. That's not, it is. And it made me realize that you're nothing like what I expected. You're strong. You're smart. You're willing to sacrifice your own happiness to protect someone else's reputation. That's not manipulation. That's honor. Draven's voice dropped lower. My whole life, I've been surrounded by wolves who want something from me. Power, status, alliances, protection. Everyone wants something. But you? You asked for nothing except your freedom. You felt our bond and decided your independence was worth more than being mated to an alpha king. Do you have any idea how rare that is? That doesn't change anything. Lyric was shaking now. Your pack still won't accept me. The other packs will see me as a weakness. My family sold me here. How does that look for your reputation? Everything you said before is still true. I don't care. Draven said it simply, like it was the easiest truth he'd ever spoken. Let them talk. Let them judge. Let them question my choices. I've spent 15 years building power and reputation and authority, and I'm telling you right now, none of it means anything if I lose you. Nothing matters if I spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to keep my mate. Sage cleared her throat. My king, perhaps we should pause the ceremony and give everyone time to think. No. Lyric surprised everyone, including herself. No more pausing. No more thinking. If we're doing this, we're deciding now. She looked at Draven, really looked at him, searching his face for any sign that this was just his wolf talking, that he'd regret this decision tomorrow when logic returned. You need to understand something. I'm not going to become someone I'm not just because I'm your mate. I'm not going to smile and nod while other wolves disrespect me for being an Omega. I'm not going to let you make decisions for me or control my life just because we're bonded. I've spent 21 years being treated like I was less than everyone else. I'm done with that. Forever. Good, Draven said firmly. I don't want you to change. I want you exactly as you are. I'm going to be difficult. I'm going to question you. I'm going to call you out when you're being an arrogant alpha who thinks he knows better than everyone else. I'm counting on it. And I'm still angry at you for how you handled this. For running away. For threatening me through Phoenix. For making me feel like I was a problem instead of a person. Lyric's eyes flashed. That's going to take time to forgive. I know. I'll spend however long it takes earning your trust back. Draven held out his hand. But I need to know, do you want this bond? Not because of who I am or what I can offer you, but because you feel it too. The rightness of it? The way everything settled into place the moment our eyes met? Lyric looked at his outstretched hand. This was the moment. The choice that would define the rest of her life. She could walk away. Take the money, clear the debt, start over somewhere new. Be free of her family, free of this pack, free of the complications that came with being mated to an alpha king. Or she could take his hand. Accept the bond. Step into a future she couldn't predict, with a wolf she barely knew, into a world that would judge her for circumstances beyond her control. Her wolf was howling yes, screaming at her to take his hand, to complete the bond, to stop fighting what they both knew was right. But Lyric's human side needed more than instinct. She needed to know she was making this choice for the right reasons. I felt it, she admitted quietly. The rightness. The recognition. Like coming home to someone I'd been searching for my whole life. But that terrifies me, Draven. Because what if the bond is lying? What if this feeling is just chemistry and we're actually terrible for each other? What if accepting this bond is the biggest mistake either of us will ever make? Draven's hand didn't waver. Then we'll figure it out together. We'll fight. We'll struggle. We'll drive each other crazy. But at least we'll be doing it as mates instead of spending the rest of our lives wondering what could have been. Lyric took a shaky breath. If I do this, if I accept this bond, you need to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll never make me feel small again. Promise me you'll treat me like an equal, not like something you own. Promise me that even when we disagree, even when I make you angry, you'll remember that I'm your partner, not your property. Draven stepped closer, closing the distance between them until they were inches apart. I promise. You're my mate, Lyric. Not my servant. Not my debt payment. Not my problem to solve. You're the wolf the moon goddess chose for me, and I swear on my pack, on my life, on everything I am, I will spend every day proving that I'm worthy of that choice. Lyric could feel the heat radiating from his body. Could smell his scent, pine and smoke and something wild that made her wolf purr with contentment. Could see the gold in his eyes, the vulnerability he was showing her, the desperate hope that she wouldn't walk away. She took his hand. The moment their skin touched, the bond blazed to life between them. It was like lightning and sunshine and coming home all at once. Lyric gasped as the connection flooded through her, stronger than before, overwhelming in its intensity. Draven pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, breathing her in like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Thank you, he whispered against her temple. Thank you for giving me a chance. Sage smiled for the first time all evening. Well then. Instead of a rejection ceremony, we have a bonding ceremony. Let's make it official. What happened next was ancient tradition. Sage guided them through the words that would complete their bond, that would tie them together permanently in the eyes of the moon goddess and the pack. Phoenix produced rings, simple silver bands that Draven had apparently commissioned days ago, when he was still planning to reject her, because his wolf had insisted on having them made just in case. Lyric slipped the ring onto Draven's finger. He slipped one onto hers. Their wolves surged forward in unison, and for a moment, their eyes both flashed gold. The bond clicked into place like a lock turning. Permanent. Unbreakable. Complete. When they kissed, the entire palace felt it. A ripple of energy that announced to every wolf within 100 miles that the Alpha King had found his mate. That the bond was complete. That everything had changed. Phoenix cleared his throat. My king, you realize that the moment you walk out of this room, everyone is going to know. The other servants will smell the mate bond on you both. By morning, every pack in the territory will have heard that you've bonded with an Omega whose family sold her to clear a debt. The scandal is going to be immediate and intense. Draven didn't take his eyes off Lyric. Let them talk. Let them scandalize. Let them question my judgment. I have my mate. Nothing else matters. You say that now, Phoenix warned. But when the allied packs start withdrawing their support, when rivals see this as weakness, when political alliances start crumbling because you chose emotion over strategy, then I'll handle it. Draven's voice was steel. I built this pack's power once. I can do it again. But I'm not sacrificing my mate for political convenience. Not now. Not ever. Lyric squeezed his hand. You might regret this tomorrow. Impossible. Draven smiled at her, a real smile that transformed his entire face. I might regret a lot of things. Running away when I first felt the bond. Threatening you through Phoenix. Trying to reject you. But keeping you? That's the one decision I'll never regret. They left the office together, hands intertwined, walking through the palace halls like they owned them. Because Draeven did own them. And now Lyric did too. Servants stared as they passed. Sage had been right, the mate bond was obvious now, radiating from both of them like heat from a fire. Whispers started immediately. By the time they reached Draeven's private quarters, the entire palace was buzzing with the news. The Alpha King had taken a mate. An Omega. A servant. A wolf whose family had sold her to clear a debt. The scandal of the century was just beginning. But inside those quarters, Draeven and Lyric didn't care about scandals or politics or what anyone else thought. They sat together on the balcony, watching the moon rise over the forest, the bond humming between them like music. What happens now? Lyric asked quietly. Now? Draeven pulled her closer. Now we figure out how to make this work. We face whatever comes together. We prove that fate was smarter than logic. We show everyone that an Alpha King can be both powerful and in love. Lyric laughed softly. Love? We've known each other for 3 days. I've known you for 3 days, Draeven corrected. My wolf has known you for eternity. There's a difference. That's the bond talking. Maybe. Or maybe the bond just revealed what was already true. Draeven pressed a kiss to her forehead. Either way, I'm not fighting it anymore. I'm done running. I'm done pretending. You're my mate, Lyric Whitlock. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret accepting that bond. Lyric leaned into him, feeling safe for the first time since her family had sold her to this pack. You're going to drive me crazy. Probably. The other packs are going to make our lives difficult. Definitely. Your reputation might never recover. Don't care. Lyric smiled despite herself. You're impossible. You're stuck with me now. Draeven's eyes were soft as he looked at her. Forever. No take-backs. Forever, Lyric echoed. And despite everything, despite the scandal, despite the politics, despite the complicated mess their bond had created, she meant it. Somewhere in the forest, a wolf howled. Another answered. And in the Alpha King's palace, 2 souls that had been broken and lonely and fighting their whole lives finally found their way home to each other. Smash that subscribe button if you believe in second chances and fated bonds. Comment forever if you think Draeven and Lyric are going to make this work despite the odds. And if you're someone who believes love is worth fighting for even when the whole world is against you, hit that like button right now. Only bitter wolves who don't believe in happy endings will skip this video without engaging. Share this story if you know someone who needs to believe in fate again.